Hello and welcome to the Payoff Pitch Podcast. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by BJ Cunningham, and we're going to help you break down a very short slate for Monday, June 26th. Let's start off with our best bets. We're going to jump right into things, and we have an agreement here, a consensus best bet. It is my largest projected edge on Monday's slate. Curious to see where BJ has this line projected to, but we're both going to go with the Chicago White Sox playing the Los Angeles Angels. Dylan Cease facing Reid Detmers. BJ, I made this one closer to about plus 105. I like the White Sox down to about plus 115. Curious to see where you projected it and why you like the White Sox tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at the White Sox plus 102, so I'm right on line with you there. This is really a bet on Dylan Cease. Like, he's had a bad start to the season, but if you look over his last 5 starts, he's actually been improving quite a lot. He's only given up 4 runs in his last 4 starts. I mean, he's only has a combined 32 strikeouts in those 4 starts. But most importantly, in his last 3 starts, his xFIP has been below 3.5. So that's showing that he's starting to trend towards the Cy Young candidate that we saw last season. Now, overall, he is a 4.4 expected ERA pitcher. He's had a bad start to the season. So comparing him to a guy like Reid Detmers, who is an average MLB starting pitcher, 4.08 expected ERA through 13 starts. He's got a very high 10.5 K per 9 rate. But the problem with him is his control has been a little bit off. His walk per 9 rate is pretty high, up at 3.5. And his average exit velocity and average hard hit rate allowed numbers are below the 40th percentile. So he's kind of struggling in that aspect. And if you look at these two offenses, I don't really think there's much of a difference between the two based on the matchups that we have. So Detmers and Cease are mainly reliant on a fastball slider combination, the both of them. If you look at the Angels versus right-handed fastballs and sliders, their run value, expected weighted on base average is about, around the league average. And the White Sox, the same against lefties. So, and then you go into look at the bullpens, the White Sox have a better stuff plus, better xFIP, and a better walk per strikeout to walk ratio than the Angels. So I agree. I have the White Sox projected at plus 102. So I think this is a pretty decent edge here on a pitcher like Cease, who does have the talent, definitely, to be that Cy Young type candidate and is starting to find his form.
Yeah, as you mentioned, strikeout rate for Cease down for the season, and it was mostly down earlier this year, but his past 4 starts, strikeout rate is back at 35%. And he was over 30% the past couple of years. That's what made him so dominant. His walk rate has been around 10% for the past few seasons, does not have great command, below average location plus numbers, but has elite stuff. The thing is, and the thing that still concerns me, his stuff plus and his velocity remains down relative to last season. He was at 124 stuff plus last year, velocity 96.8 miles an hour. This year, he's sitting closer to 95.4 miles an hour, and his stuff plus is down 10 points. And even in the past 4 starts, it hasn't really rebounded, but he's faced the Dodgers, he's faced the Rangers. He had a 40% strikeout rate against those 2 teams. I don't know if it's a command thing, I shouldn't say command. I don't know if it's a location thing where maybe he's getting that fastball up above the hands just a touch more. Maybe it's stuff that's not showing up in his location numbers and in the walk rate, things like that. But I haven't looked at heat maps. I can't really tell you why the strikeout rate has come back. Something I want to look into more. I would assume it's probably just hitting his targets a little bit better, getting that slider a little bit more down to the way, fastball a little bit more up in the zone. I'm sure the heat maps have kind of trended back towards where they were last year, even though the velocity sort of is staying down. But the White Sox in both halves, my favorite bet for today, plus 120 for the first 5 innings, plus 114, plus 115 for the full game, betting them in both halves. Let's move on to Fade the Public. And today we have a couple of games that are pretty heavily to public action. One of them is the Texas Rangers at home against the Detroit Tigers. Texas taking 89% of the bets and 99% of the money. No bet on the side here for me. I believe I am close to pulling the trigger on the Detroit Tigers, but a bet that I have already made here is the under. I already bet the under 9.5. I still like it at 9 up to minus 115. Rangers have had a lot of high scoring games at home. Their offense has been great this year. Top 2, top 3 against both lefties and righties. But with the dome closed at home, you have to knock down that park factor by about 7%. When Texas has the dome open, typically plays about even on a league average run environment, maybe a few percentage points above. But when the dome is closed in Arlington, it plays about 7% below the major league average. So curious to hear where BJ has that total projected today. I have it around 8.3 with a park factor of about 93%. Again, about 7% below the major league average run scoring environment. Both teams do hit lefties very well, and the Tigers, in fact, hit lefties better than they do righties. But with that dome closed, I just don't think the total is too high. So made it 8.3, bet the under 9 to -115. And if that Tigers money line floats up closer to about +230, +240, I'll have to consider jumping in on the underdog as well. BJ, anything for you on Rangers and Tigers?
Yeah, I'm going to pass. I have the total at 8.9, factoring in the dome being closed. So I'm a little bit higher than you. And I have the Rangers at -184. So I'm pretty much right on with where the market has it. I mean, Heaney, it's interesting. He's overperformed a little bit. His xERA is up at 4.6. So you should see a little bit of regression, but the Tigers offense has been terrible against both lefties and righties. So it's hard to get behind Detroit unless you can get really good odds. So like you said, if Detroit floats up into, +200, +210, that type of area, which I don't think we're going to get, maybe pull the trigger on them. But other than that, this is a pass for me.
Yeah, I need to correct my price target. So I made Detroit +173. So yes, if it gets up to +200, I'd probably consider it, not +220, +240. I was thinking of the Nationals when I was mentioning that game. Since we're talking about the Nationals Mariners, BJ short slate, anything for you on Nats Mariners? I made that line Mariners -208.
Yeah, I have Mariners -217. I actually like the over in this game. Trevor Williams has been a very below average pitcher this season, and Castillo has been great, but the Nationals offense has come alive here in the last few days. They just put 8 runs on the Padres the other day, and it's just a total that I believe is way, way too low considering the 2 starting pitching matchups and given how bad the Washington bullpen has been as well. So I think this is, the Mariners have been below average against right-handed pitching. But again, we have Williams, who's a 5.23 xERA pitcher. We shouldn't be setting a total at 7.5 with him on the mound. So I have the total projected actually at 8.3. So I really like the over in that game.
Where do you like it up to? Because it has moved up to 8 in most places. I would bet it to 8 at even money. I also bet the over 7.5. I made this line 8.2. Luis Castillo, his expected marks closer to 4 this season. He's actually not pitched quite as well as the reputation was suggesting, as the strikeouts are racking up. BJ, where's your cutoff price target? Because for me, it's 8 at even money.
Yeah, right there. 8 at, I'd say -102 would be my cutoff if we're at 3% of value. So, that's where I'd go on that. So pretty close to, even money. I think the best line you can find right now is -103. So if you want to shorten your units on that, if you really want to play it, then that's how I'd play it.
So in alignment there, also the first 5 over sitting at 4 -120. I made it 4.5. If it was 4 -110, would probably consider betting that. But at -120, I think it's probably too juiced for me. Let's move on to our favorite underdogs for Monday's short slate. We already gave you one in the Chicago White Sox, who I like in both halves. BJ also likes for the full game. Let's see if we can find a couple of more, one from each of us that we like as an underdog bet for Monday's slate. And I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Reds, but for the first 5 innings only. The full game price target has moved out of my range. I like that down to +125. Bet 130 last night. It has moved down closer to +115, but a number that I do still like to +115 is their first 5 innings money line. Actually projected 2 starting pitchers here as relatively comparable. Cole Irvin, Brandon Williamson. Irvin has an expected ERA north of 8 this season. Williamson over 5. And that's roughly where he pitched in the high minors too, even before the Reds called him up. He had expected indicators in the 5s, hadn't had great numbers in AAA or AA prior to getting the call, but the Reds clearly saw something. He has basically matched those results in the major leagues, which is actually better than you would have expected, translating to a higher level of baseball. But Williamson has been pretty enigmatic. Stuff Plus is better than what Irvin offers. Irvin offers better command, but both below average starters. I do like the over in this matchup quite a bit. The over 9.5 to -110. Don't believe that is still available, but if it comes back down, would certainly bet it. But one number that is still there, as I said, the Reds in the first half, +115, can throw out 9 right-handed bats. They're going to throw out 8. They'll put Joey Votto in the lineup, but can put out 9 right-handed bats against Irvin. The A's, or the Orioles, I should say, in the same way, can also throw out 9 right-handed bats against Williamson, but I do project the Reds offense as better than the Orioles offense. The Orioles only have a 98 WRC plus projected for me. I actually make the Reds closer to 114. So below average offense for Baltimore, above average for Cincinnati. Also, the Reds, the number 1 base running team in baseball. Hinted advantages there. since they brought up Elliot A. Cruz. They have a top 4 offense in baseball. This team is absolutely electric. And just going hitter for hitter down these lineups, I think the Reds have a deeper lineup than the Orioles do. The Orioles lineup after that 4-5 spot really starts to drop off once you start getting to guys like Aaron Hicks. So prefer the Reds lineup in a matchup between 2 below average left-handed starters. Give me the Reds in the first 5 innings to plus 115. BJ, anything for you on that Reds Orioles game? And then give me your favorite underdog for today's slate, aside from the White Sox.
No, I'm actually right around where the odds have it. So I actually have the Orioles at minus 132. Probably not projecting, a lot of value. I mean, I'm basically using a lot of Irvin's projected numbers because he hasn't pitched quite a bit this season. So that's kind of where I have that. For my underdog, I mean, I don't like doing this because I'll have to get your thoughts on this guy before we get out of here, but I'm going to fade Spencer Strider and the Braves, who are the hottest team in baseball. And I'm going to take the Twins at plus 175. Sonny Gray has been good this season. He has overperformed. Yes. He's got 2.5 ERA. Expected ERA is around 3.7. But one of the reasons why he's overperformed is he's only given up 2 home runs in 15 starts. And, eventually a guy who's, below the 30th percentile in average exit velocity allowed and barrel rate allowed and all of these StatCast metrics, eventually that's going to regress, especially facing the Braves lineup. It's a little bit concerning, but Gray does have good pitch mix, a good usage of all 5 of his pitches. He throws all of them at least 15% of the time. And if you dig into his stuff plus numbers, he does have a stuff plus of 101, which is above average. He has 3 pitches that have a stuff plus above 100. And the Twins lineup has been much better against right-handed pitching. They're 12th in WRC plus against righties, 27th against lefties. So it's good reason they're facing a righty. And Strider, I don't know what to make of it. You look at his stuff plus numbers and pitching plus, he's by far and away the best pitcher in baseball. Like it's his stuff plus is 127, which is above Garrett Cole and Ohtani. But he's had some shaky starts. He's given 8 runs to the Mets, he gave 5 runs to the Tigers, and then his last start against the Phillies was pretty good. But the 10 starts before the start against the Phillies, he had given up at least 2 runs in 10 straight starts. His expected ERA is now at 3.36. For context, last season he was almost a full run lower at around 2.3. So he's very reliant on his fastball, and it's very good. Like he's averaging 97 miles an hour of velocity on it. But last season he was averaging 98.2. So there has been a little bit of dip in velocity, and now he's allowing an expected weighted on base average of 340 on his fastball when last season he was allowing 280. Then you look at the bullpen matchup here. The Twins have the exact same stuff plus numbers as the Braves. They have a very close to the same xFIP, strikeout to walk ratio, and left on base percentage. So at plus 175, I made the Braves minus 152. So there's some decent value here on the Twins on a very short slate. Again, if we had a large 15-game slate, I don't think I'd be using the Twins as my underdog to fade Strider. But given the short slate, I like the Twins at plus 175.
So there's no bet for me on this game currently. This is another one where if the line creeps closer to plus 200, I will consider betting the underdog. I made the Braves minus 175. As you mentioned with Strider, velocity has dipped a little bit compared to last year. Dominant early this year. Then he had a 2 or 3 start stretch where that fastball velocity dipped closer to 96 miles an hour. But in his last start against the Phillies, it went back up to 97.6, which was his second highest level of the entire season. So probably why he had more success in that start against the Phillies. I haven't compared the stuff plus numbers, but I'm assuming it had jumped back up to previous levels. The start against the Mets, where he got shelled, 96 miles an hour, his lowest fastball velocity of the season. And it's impossible to predict where he's going to be at on any given night. But one thing we do know is he's going to throw a fastball or a slider basically 95% of the time. Twins bottom 10 offense against fastballs, top 10 offense against sliders. So maybe they can sit on that slider, hit Strider a little bit, but not something I'm going to bank on at current numbers. As I said, need to come closer to plus 200 in order to consider betting it. If Strider had still been sitting at that 96 and a half velocity level where he had been against the Mets and the Tigers, I would still have him downgraded a little bit here, and I probably would be betting on the Twins. But at the current level, it is a pass for me. I gave him a slight bump back up to where I had him earlier in the season. Let's talk about our final bets for Monday's slate. Not a ton left on the board. BJ already covered The Nationals Mariners over 7.5, which we both like. He already mentioned the Twins, and he already mentioned the White Sox. So BJ, I think there's a future that you added to your card yesterday that I definitely want to hear about from you. And if there's anything else on the board for you to bet today, please let the people know now.
Yeah, I mean, the three bets that I've already mentioned are basically my only three bets. I know you just added the White Sox first five into the app. I also added that at plus one, still a plus 120 out there at BetMGM. I have added Justin Steele to win the National League Cy Young at 25-1. I was looking through the odds, and this is something I do looking through, futures or whatever it is when I dig into somebody's numbers. Steele's been about a 2.4 WAR. He has been a 2.4 WAR this season, which is third among National League starting pitchers who have obviously have qualified number of innings. And as you've mentioned, you've noted many times, is that WAR rules all when it comes to these type of awards. And if you look through his metrics, I mean, he's a 2.6 ERA pitcher, 3.15 expected ERA. And you look at his average exit velocity allowed, he's in like the 95th percentile. He's keeping balls off the barrel. Like, I looked through this and I was like, wait, why am I not betting this guy? Like there's everything in the StatCast number shows that he is a top tier pitcher in the National League and a race that is very open right now, the National League Cy Young race. So, you've already put out Blake Snell at 40-1, which I did tail as well. So looking at, Steele, who's going to be obviously pitching in Wrigley Field is, can be troublesome at times with whatever way the wind is going. But again, he's going to be pitching, against the National League Central, for a decent amount of these, which has been below average offenses this season outside of the Reds. So I was looking at it and I just said, wait, why am I not betting this guy at 25-1? So I have bet Justin Steele at 25-1 to win the National League Cy Young. A lot of his StatCast metrics are just very, very good. And in an open race, I think it is a good idea to take one of these long shots, especially, guys like Snell or a guy like Steele.
Yeah, Justin Steele, a guy I've been betting on pretty regularly too since he came up last season. I think similar to a Nestor Cortez, limits hard contact, doesn't throw particularly hard, doesn't generate a ton of strikeouts, doesn't seem like he's super impressive, but he's extremely effective. And the underlying metrics show that. The expected ERA shows that. Tons of deceptiveness. And also, like Strider, even though he only throws 2 pitches, Justin Steele actually has a lot of variations in the way that he manipulates his four-seam fastball and his slider. So he actually turns 2 pitches into several just by the way he slightly manipulates things. He's a bit of a unique pitcher. He's not somebody that pitching models are going to accurately measure below average stuff plus on his fastball. That is incorrect. It just doesn't know how to accurately measure it because pitching models don't have anything to compare it to. So Justin Steele is a unicorn to a degree, and certainly I think can continue suppressing hard contact going forward, even though traditional metrics, expected FIP, things like that, don't say he's as good as his expected ERA would. BJ mentioned that I bet Blake Snell to win the National League Cy Young. That is something that I did add since the last time we were on this podcast. And in terms of BJ mentioning wins above replacement, I do think it's funny because only 2 of the past 14 Cy Young winners have failed to finish in the top 3 in their respective leagues in wins above replacement. Blake Snell was one of them in 2018. And the guy Blake Snell is giving me very similar vibes to right now is Robbie Ray from 2021. Mm-hmm. Robbie Ray started off that 2021 season not the best, if I remember, and then eventually found his form, got to 100-1 to win the AL Cy Young at one point, found his form, went on an absolute tear over the final 4 months, and eventually pulled away from Garrett Cole and won the award. Blake Snell was not great for the first few months of the season. In fact, he was somebody we were betting against very regularly. His expected metrics had climbed over 5. But in his last 4 starts, I actually have to pull it up because the numbers are pretty ridiculous. But he has just shut out everybody and gotten basically double-digit strikeouts in every start for his past 3 outings. In June alone, 25 innings, 6 walks, 43 strikeouts for Blake Snell. And he struck out 43 of 91 batters faced, which is a ridiculous 47% strikeout rate. These are not things you can replicate. I mean, if he keeps this form, he's winning it. He is. Mm-hmm. Now, Spencer Strider still there. Great Snell's ERA is about a half run higher than Strider's. And Snell has shown us already that he doesn't need to finish in the top 3 and more in order to win the Cy Young. He just seems to catch fire at the right time and end up with really good numbers at the end of the year, even though when he's bad, he's not going more than 5 innings per start, and he's kind of keeping his wins above replacement low. So Snell, a guy who traditionally I would look to the top of the wins above replacement leaderboard. For example, Kevin Gausman in the American League, a guy I bet every year to win the Cy Young because he projects to be amongst the wins above replacement leaders at the end of the year. And even right now, Gausman projects to be there at the end of the year. So he's traditionally a guy I'm going to identify as somebody to bet on for Cy Young, whereas Blake Snell, being lower on the WAR leaderboard, not going to be a guy who pops up for me. But we're going against projections a little bit more of late. The Reds at 40-1 to win the NL Central, looking like a good bet now. Neither Pacoda nor Fangraphs thought that was a good bet when we made it. And Blake Snell to win the NL Cy Young. Currently 25-1. I probably wouldn't take worse than 30-1 at this point, but with the form he's in, that number is just going to keep getting lower. So maybe you bet a Blake Snell ticket, end up selling it on Prop Swap or something, do with it what you will. But I think there's an almost certainty that number continues to go lower, especially with the form he's in. So that is a bet I like from a futures market. My final bet for Monday's slate is going to be the Milwaukee Brewers as an underdog against my New York Mets. The flailing New York Mets were very much on their way out of the playoffs race. I'm going to call a victory lap here on my Mets to miss the playoffs, not because I think they're guaranteed to miss the playoffs at this point, but the timing of when I gave that out was freaking awesome. I told you exactly what was going to happen, the schedule they were going to head into, and they have absolutely tanked. So the timing on that Mets to miss the playoffs bet, I think, was absolutely perfect. Just another reminder, if you're considering betting futures, take a look at the upcoming schedule for the next 4 to 6 weeks for these teams. You can kind of figure out how it might go for them over that stretch. But the reason the Mets have struggled this year, their bullpen was put together very carelessly, and they do not have a ton of depth. They rank 25th in expected FIP. They continually let this team down late in games. They did yesterday against the Phillies. And Buck Showalter also just seems frustrated with the inability to aggressively use guys because it seems like they never have more than a few arms available. Justin Verlander, his stuff plus is down relative to last year. His strikeout rate down significantly relative to last year, even the past couple of years. Definitely a lesser pitcher than what we saw when he won the Cy Young. He's closer to a number 3 starter, high 3s expected ERA than a mid-2s ace level pitcher. And Colin Ray is a pretty comfortable average major league starter, 4.3 expected ERA, 99 pitching plus. So only about a half run difference in terms of projected ERAs between Verlander and Ray. The bullpen's relatively comparable. I like the Brewers here plus 150 or better, but I also like the over up to 8.5 at even money or 8 minus 120 with the wind blowing out at Citi Field, 12 miles an hour to left field today. So I think we get some runs in Queens, but I also like the Brewers at plus 150 or better. BJ, anything for you on Mets Brewers?
No, I had that line projected around right where it was, but no, I agree with you that Verlander's, been interesting stuff. Like you mentioned, stuff plus numbers have been down, and this is just kind of what happens with both him and Scherzer. They're just old. Like they've gotten old, and their velocity goes down when you get old. So, I had that projected right around where it was, so I'm passing on that one.
The old guys, Verlander, Scherzer, Adam Wainwright, strikeout rates all in the tank this season. Have to wonder if the pitch clock just taking a little bit of stuff out of these old guys, don't have as much time to reload from one pitch to the next. Time was going to catch up with all of them eventually anyway, but I do think the pitch clock has had some impact on their inability to generate strikeouts. Maybe Dylan Cease managing his energy better of lately, that strikeout rate coming back up. So I just think the pitch clock has been very difficult to quantify the impact that it has actually had on people, but I think it's fairly intuitive that the bigger pitchers, guys like Alek Manoah, Lance Lynn, guys are out of shape, or the older guys like Verlander, Scherzer might be struggling, with less reload time from one pitch to the next. But that'll do it for me and BJ for Monday, June 26th. Again, a short slate, but hopefully we gave you enough bets to have an actionable Monday evening. For BJ Cunningham, I'm Sean Zerillo. We will be back on Tuesday morning for another edition of Payoff Pitch.